Will the circle be unbroken by and by is a better home awaiting in the sky, oh, in the sky, in the joyous days of childhood, all faith's hope of wondrous love.
Women's suffrage began in 1869 when Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and others refused to endorse the 15th Amendment because it did not give women the ballot. Instead, it gave black men the ability to vote. Other suffragists, however, including Lucy Stone and Julia Ward Howe, argued that this was the first step towards women's rights. As a result of the conflict, two organizations emerged. Stanton and Anthony formed the National Women's Suffrage Association to work for suffrage on the federal level and to press for more changes, such as the granting of property rights to married women. These two groups eventually came together to form NASA. They faced many problems while fighting for what they believed in. Many women didn't want this. This rationale swayed many a male legislator. It is true that at times, even well-educated women in countries with high percentages of female illiteracy joined men who claimed that as long as the majority of women were still illiterate and ignorant, it would be dangerous to extend them the vote. The anti-suffrage groups in the U.S., for example, were mainly led by women. These women fought for the rights of women and were harassed during parades, some even physically abused. During the women's suffrage parade of 1913, the women in the parade were attacked by bystanders and the cops did nothing to stop the women from being injured. They simply looked the other way. The NWP, formed from NASA by Alice Paul, picketed the White House and were arrested under obstruction of traffic, a complete obscure accusation considering they were on the sidewalk out of the way of traffic. These women picketed from January 10, 1917 to June 1919. They picketed every day except Sunday. No matter how many women were arrested, they always had more ready to take over, so there wasn't a day that women weren't picketing. They stood in front of the White House during all sorts of weather. Alice Paul insisted that no mother should be picketing in case they were arrested and torn away from their families. Alice Paul herself was kept out of the picket as long as possible. If their leader was arrested, they would not be able to continue with such a vigorous drive because no one could lead as well as Alice Paul. The obscure charge that they were obstructing traffic resulted in many of the NWP women being thrown in jail. In jail, they were treated poorly. Many women were harassed and physically beaten by the guards. Alice Paul decided to go on a hunger strike, resulting in her being force-fed. Following her lead, the rest of the NWP women went on hunger strike also. The people in charge of the jail decided the only option was to force-feed these women too. When this leaked into the papers, it caught the public's attention. This caused great havoc for the government since they were blamed. Shortly after the force-feeding incident, Woodrow Wilson gave the following speech. "The women of America are too noble and too intelligent and too devoted to be slackers. Whether you give or withhold this thing, this is mere justice. But I know the magic, it will work in their thoughts and spirits if you give it them. I propose it as I would propose to admit soldiers to the suffrage, the men fighting in the field for our liberties and the liberties of the world, were they excluded. The tasks of the women lie at the very heart of the war. I know how much stronger that heart will be if you do this just thing and show our women that you trust them as much as you, in fact, and of necessity, depend upon them. Have I said that the passage of this amendment is a vitally necessary war measure? And do you need further proof? Do you stand in need of the trust of other peoples and of the trust of our own women? Is that trust an asset or is it not? I tell you plainly as the commander-in-chief of our armies and of our gallant men and our fleets, as the present spokesman of this people in our dealings with the men and women throughout the world who are now our partners, as the responsible head of a great government which stands and is questioned day by day as to its purposes, its principles, its hopes, whether they be serviceable to men everywhere or only to itself. and who must himself answer these questionings or be shamed, as the guide and director of forces caught in the grip of war, and by the same token in need of every material and spiritual resource this great nation possesses. I tell you plainly that this measure, which I urge upon you, is vital to the winning of the war, and to the energies alike of preparation and of battle. The 19th Amendment was ratified on August 18, 1920, finally giving women in the U.S. the right to vote.